Have you ever stared into the eyes of death and made a deal?
Not with a man or an army, but with something far older. Something that doesn't forgive broken promises. I bolted through the jungle, my legs barely carrying me over the uneven ground, every step a jarring reminder of how close I was to death. Behind me, the deafening crack of gunfire tore through the silence, bullets ripping past me, some so close I could feel the air shift as they zipped by. The barking of the dogs was getting louder, their snarls like some twisted countdown to the end of my life. I couldn't let them catch me. I couldn't go back to that hell. I was just a few miles from the South Korean border, the place I'd pinned all my hopes on. But between me and freedom stood a wall of razor wire, soldiers armed to the teeth, and watchtowers scanning for people like me. Desperate, terrified, running from the nightmare of the North. I didn't care anymore. It was either die here in the jungle or die back in the prison. At least if I made it to the border, I'd have a fighting chance. I could barely think as I ran. I slid down a muddy slope, my feet slipping, barely staying upright as I hit the ground running. A bullet struck a tree just inches from my face, the wood splintering in an explosion of bark and dust. I knew what would happen if they caught me. The torture, the humiliation, the dogs. But I hadn't come this far to die in the mud. My only chance was ahead, a forgotten sewer tunnel. I found it. I dove in without a second thought, the rancid stench of sewage and decay filling my lungs as I crawled on my hands and knees. The space was tight, claustrophobic, but I didn't care. It was my only way out. Behind me, I heard the soldiers stop at the entrance. I could hear the dogs, their snarling right at the tunnel's mouth, but they didn't come in. I had moments, just moments.
Please subscribe if you are rooting for Soldier Boy.
That was months ago. How did I end up here, you ask? Let me take you back to the start. You've seen the headlines. North Korea, the world's most secretive state, ruled by the great leader Kim Jong Un, the supreme commander, the father of all propaganda. Well, let me tell you something. He's even worse in person. The guy? Picture this. A man who thinks he's some kind of god, but with the ego of a spoiled brat who throws a tantrum if his cheeseburger isn't cooked perfectly. I was one of his most trusted bodyguards, handpicked to keep him safe. Or as he put it, to ensure his divine presence never faced harm. Yeah, because that's normal, right? One day, during some high-stakes meeting, I guess I let my guard down. I don't even know what I did wrong, but Kim, he doesn't need a reason. One moment you're at his side, the next you're being dragged to one of the darkest corners of his regime.
100 days of torture followed by an execution. That was the order.
The 100 days of torture I endured weren't just to punish me. No, Kim wanted to me. The prison was hell on earth. They strapped me to a chair, locked my head in place, and kept the lights on for days. No food, no water, no sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, a jolt of electricity would snap through my body, just enough to keep me alive, but always on the edge of collapse. Then came the nightmare. The interrogations were a twisted game of torture, where they'd gleefully pull out your fingernails, their laughter echoing off the cold, damp walls like a macabre symphony. Each scream was music to their ears, and every gasp for breath was a victory in their cruel playbook. They employed all manner of torment, electrocuting my testicles that sent jolts of agony coursing through my body, waterboarding that stole every ounce of hope, and brutal beatings with bamboo rods that left me gasping for breath. It was a waking hell, with no end in sight, a relentless cycle of pain designed to break me. But the worst part came at night.
That's when they unleashed the dogs. These were monsters bred for bloodlust, trained to tear apart anyone unfortunate enough to cross their path. Their low growls reverberated through the corridors, a chilling reminder that with each passing hour, my fate hung by a thread. The shadows of their massive bodies would loom near my cell, their hot, fetid breath seeping through the bars as they sniffed for fear, their hunger palpable. I knew what awaited me on the 100th day, a fate worse than death. I was destined to be fed to these beasts, my screams swallowed by the darkness, my existence reduced to nothing more than a gruesome spectacle. But I survived, barely. And on the night before they were set to throw me to the dogs, I escaped. I crawled through filth, through that tunnel, until I hit the jungle. I was crawling through the sewage tunnel, gagging from the stench, the filth clinging to me when I saw her. I thought my mind had cracked. After days without sleep and weeks of torture, who wouldn't see things? But there she was, clear as day, standing at the far end of the tunnel. Her face was pale, gaunt, her long dark hair hanging wet and limp over her shoulders. She was waiting for me.
"Go back or you'll die,"
she whispered, her voice a haunting echo through the narrow tunnel. I tried to speak, but the words got caught in my throat. My mind screamed at me to ignore her, to keep moving, but something about her held me there. Her eyes, they weren't just hollow. They were filled with sorrow. I had heard stories about her before. The ghost of a woman who had tried to escape North Korea years ago, only to be shot just before she made it across the border. The soldiers left her body to rot in the jungle, but her spirit never left. She stayed behind, guiding those who were brave or stupid enough to make the journey.
She told me her story. She was a political prisoner, one of the many voices silenced by the regime. Her husband had been executed, her kids taken away. She tried to escape. They hunted her down. But death didn't free her. She was trapped in the jungle, unable to cross into the south, forever doomed to help others try what she could not. And yet, despite it all, she still believed there was hope.
Please subscribe and click the playlist for more bone-chilling tales of betrayal and madness.